Hi, I'm Joe Salzone. This is a walking tour of different places around downtown Auburn. Today we're at the Cayuga Museum of History and Art, located right in the middle of downtown Auburn, a historic place if there ever was one. And we're gonna go inside and we're gonna get a tour, a guided tour of the museum. So come on, let's go. You know, long before this was a museum in 1936, people actually lived here. And with that in mind, we're joined by Kirsten Wise. She's the director, the executive director of the Cayuga Museum of History and Art.
Yes.
Is that right?
It is right.
Got it right.
In fact, we have two more buildings with equally long names. So we have the Cayuga Museum of History and Art, we have the Case Research Laboratory Historic Site, and the Carriage House Theater.
That's like 30 words.
It's 30 words.
Altogether. Kirsten, thanks for having us. This has been a museum for a long time. People probably know it most as a museum, but before it was a museum, this was a personal residence.
Yes, it was a regular family home to two prominent families who lived in Auburn for a very long time, the Willards and the Cases. The Willards, they first purchased the home in 1843. It was first built in 1836. And when it was first built, it was called a four-square plan. So there were two rooms on each side of the house, and there were two different levels. There were two different additions made to the house, which I can show you as we go along. But this room that we're standing in was originally Dr. Willard's library and sitting room. So the only really original thing that still remains from here is the fireplace and the woodwork around the windows. But it would have been covered with big velvet draperies and bookshelves and big plush furniture and kind of just a nice dark room for him to come and hang out.
Now, he was a doctor, so I'm guessing a lot of the books he had were medical textbooks?
Some, yes, but he was a physician as well as a philanthropist. He invested heavily in the Oswego cornstarch factory, which is how he made most of his money. They lived in Chicago before they moved here, where they were also involved in railroads. But a lot of actually the bigger homes along here, the families, they invested in cornstarch, and that's how they made their money.
And this is a good-sized room. Mm-hmm. So imagining it just draped in velvet, as you mentioned, and books, that's a lot of space for books. Yeah. Was it always yellow?
No.
Didn't think so.
We just painted it yellow a few years ago.
Look at that.
Yeah.
We've just broke some news here. Is this an original fireplace?
I don't know if all of the woodwork was original, but I do know that each room in the home, it did have a fireplace because that's how they, of course, heated the homes in the 1800s.
Is this a real fireplace? Does it work?
No, it does not work.
It does not work?
It does not work.
She's right, it doesn't work. I just checked. I'm an expert on fireplaces.
Oh, are you?
No.
Okay, something right here, a very beautiful stained glass window. But that was actually from the Fay family mausoleum in Fort Hill Cemetery, that it was removed in the 1990s and donated to the museum because there was some vandalism happening in the cemetery.
That's not good.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful part of our collection now.
It's very nice.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
Yeah. So here's actually Dr. Willard himself. And like I said, so part of the many things that he did was he was, of course, a physician. So when the house was first built, this was the outside wall. So in the 1850s, he added this area onto the museum. I'm sure if you've ever come up from downtown, you see that it's a curved space. Mm-hmm. So he added this as his exam room and dispensary.
So originally, we would be standing outside. In the original design of the house, we would be outside.
The 1830s or 1840s, yes, we would be outside. And then in the 1850s, he added this on. But we would be in a hallway, so there would be an identical room just like this one right here. But there are these nice curved doors, that, so this was the patient entrance. He added this on so the patients could come through their separate entrance. Friends and family would come through the front door, and then you would wait to be seen in this little area.
So he lived here and he worked here.
Yes.
This was his home and his office. Yes. Because that's what happens when you live and work somewhere. It's your home and your office.
But when he when he came here in 1843, it was the second time that he lived in Cayuga County. When he first was here, he lived in Senate, and he was actually a horseback doctor.
A horseback doctor?
Yeah, so in the early 1800s, people who were physicians, they didn't have a centralized practice, so they would they would just take their doctor bag and they would travel to the people who needed them. So he would go on horseback. Part of what we have in this exhibit, actually these snowshoes, are from another doctor who lived in Kelligsville, and he would go see his patients by using snowshoes in the winter.
I'm just trying to visualize that. That would have taken a while, I'm guessing, to get around.
And remember that there weren't phones, so people couldn't call. So by the time you got the letter, so somewhere in the exhibit we have the letter that goes with those, that a father, his daughter was sick, so he had to write a letter to summon the doctor, which took days. And then by the time he got here, sometimes people unfortunately expired by the time the doctors would get to them. But
expired. That's a very nice way of putting that.
It
they died.
is a very nice way of saying that.
We take for granted now that one quick phone call you can schedule something. This is also a time where there were no plows, so horses would actually have to trudge through several feet of snow to get from house to house. That's don't get sick. In the 1800s, don't get sick. That's the rule. If you time travel,
it was a very trying time.
Yeah,
yes.
Don't catch a cold or you'll expire.
Yes. But another part of what I really like about this area down here is our beautiful Tiffany window, which is one of the shining stars of this property. And this is it's the precursor to the Willard Chapel. Have you heard of the Willard Chapel before?
I've heard of it, Kirsten.
This was the Willard home. So they had the Tiffany Studios put in this window in the late 1800s, and you can see it's curved. So it was created specifically for this place. It was also used as a regular working window. We have some old photos of the house from the outside where you can see it's open, which by today's standards, it's you don't really want to touch it, but they just saw it as a normal window.
Is that an authentic chair?
No.
Would a guest or a patient have sat in this chair?
They would have sat in a chair.
But not this chair?
Not that chair.
Okay.
No, that's a newer chair.
Is it? Yeah, that's 20th century. That has a 20th century sound. Listen to that.
Yeah.
I hurt my hand.
Yeah.
Hurt my hand.
The reason that, the reason that we put this exhibit in this space is because it was actually where Dr. Willard practiced, but part of what made up the Cayuga Museum's collection is other collections from other local societies. So since the very beginning, we've had the full collection of the Cayuga County Medical Society. So it makes a lot of sense to utilize this in a permanent exhibit. So actually right here, this is Dr. Willard's surgery kit. So this is part of what he would take with him when he went out to visit the patients.
I have a bread knife that looks very much like that one.
Do you know what this, can you guess what that is?
Oh, I could. Looks like a drill of some kind.
A dental drill.
Oh,
Yeah,
yikes. Am I allowed to touch it?
you can. You be
Okay.
careful with it.
I'm actually kind of surprised that there would have been a drill back then. I always assumed that it was manual. How?
Well, it's foot powered.
It's foot. So the doctor, as he's drilling,
He has to pump it with his foot. And I'm saying he because they were mainly men. 99% of them were men at the time. So you can come to the museum anytime that we're open and see this permanent exhibit on 19th century medicine, which includes all sorts of creepy things from 19th century doctors who worked in Cayuga County.
and because the museum has different times throughout the year, at the bottom of the screen you can find out when the museum is open. Right here. That's it.
So back to kind of talking about the house. So this was the first addition to the home. This room would have originally been the family's dining room. Now, in the early days of the museum, there wasn't a ton of effort made to preserve the original character of the home. It was kind of just looked at as a space for showing art and different historical exhibits. However, we do still have quite a bit of the original character of the home. So up here you can see that we have part of the original ceiling design. So that's the original plasterwork and the wallpaper.
For a house that's, what, 200
Almost
years
200
old?
years
Almost
old.
200 years old? It's in pretty good shape.
Isn't it?
I mean, it's tough enough to build a house nowadays, but to have done it back then and to have it be so well maintained, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. We're really lucky that we have it. So this area would have been the dumbwaiter because, of course, the kitchen was always on the lower level. The kitchen would never, it's the complete opposite of today, where when you go into a home, the kitchen is the center of the home. Opposite back then. It was always in the basement. They had servants to help them out. So this was the dumbwaiter that would have access right downstairs into the kitchen. For now, it's just a little tiny gallery space. But so this room was, I like to joke, it was not nearly big enough for a family of 4. They had to add a larger one on. So this was the second addition to the home in the 1870s. So they added this whole area on. We still have some of the original characters. So we have the woodwork throughout. This would have been a beautiful fireplace. There was actually the same thing over here. There was a sideboard that had identical woodwork that was installed over here. Unfortunately, it was taken out at some point. That I like to point out to people is we have very squeaky pocket door into the closet.
Authentic
squeak. So as you can see in here, we have some of the original wallpaper that's seen over here and over here. It was, it's dark brown, so that would have covered this entire room. So we had dark brown wallpaper, dark brown floor. We had heavy velvet draperies again. This was actually a window that was built right into the closet.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I've been here countless times. I never noticed. I always thought this was just a closet, and that's why no one would ever see what's inside. But this,
yeah. And
this
then this
is an exhibit in of itself.
Very deep storage, which you can see goes the whole way back through there.
Hello, hello, hello. That's a good echo.
That is a good echo. And then they had shutters that would pop right in there like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Everything was very difficult back then. Very difficult. Intricate and difficult.
Efficient.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, so when you come, if you spend some time, you can really see some of the nice original details that we still have. We still have the nice pocket doors that slide so well. We have beautiful doorknobs and things like that. So you can really spend some time looking around and seeing beautiful things that are still here.
That's a heavy door.
It's a very heavy door.
That's a solid, a solid oak.
And when they put on the new dining room edition is when they also put in this marble floor.
That's marble. Broke my hand again. Worth it. Well, hang on a second.
And when you see...
Hold on. We can't walk by these bones and just ignore it.
Okay.
So, what are they? Why are they here? Are they as heavy as they look?
Yes. So these are mastodon bones.
They're what?
A mastodon.
Like an elephant?
Yes, a very, very large elephant. It wasn't quite as large as a woolly mammoth, but it was pretty close. Many, many thousands of years ago, they roamed free all throughout the Finger Lakes region. These were dug up on a farm in Venice, New York. So part of the reason that we have these is because the founding director of the museum, Professor Walter Long, he was part of the Central New York Archaeological Society, where they traveled all around doing things like digging up mastodon bones. So we've had these for a very long time. They're another one of the things that are too large to put in storage, so we just like to have them on permanent display. They're also really great for when we have school tours and children come through, because you can touch them. This is one rib bone.
Wow.
So one rib bone, tusk, leg bone, and then this was one tooth.
This is one tooth?
Which I like to encourage children to use 2 hands when they hold it.
Yeah, that, now, point of reference. This is a mastodon tooth. That's a human tooth. Much bigger by 100,000%, give or take. Not really good with numbers or baseball, that's right.
But, so you can imagine how large this animal must have been to have a whole mouthful of these teeth.
Also note that the curve. A dentist with that drill back there could have saved that tooth.
And then this other room would have originally been kind of a double sitting room. So it was here's another little photo right here, kind of looking at this corner. So it had lush wallpaper, which there's a little bit you can see in here. Actually, if you touch it, it's velvet.
That wallpaper?
Uh-huh. So it's up here, but there's a little bit. So that would have been covering the entire thing.
Wow. That is a very interesting material.
Yeah. There would have been a fireplace on each side over here with like a marble surround. And then this is the one room that has seen the most change. When Ted Case had the home, he changed this into the wood paneled room in the early 1920s. So he took out the two fireplaces, took out the wallpaper, and put in a centralized fireplace and the wood paneling.
Was that just to make his own mark on the house?
I think so.
Big space.
It's a very big space. And we have a few other things, other parts of the permanent collection that are too large for storage. We have a Wegman piano, which is still used sometimes. We have a beautiful harp that was handmade by a local resident. And then we have a marble statue of Josiah Barber by a Cayuga County artist.
But look at that. Wegman Piano Company, Auburn, New York. Mm-hmm. Not the Wegman. Or is it the Wegman?
Not the same Wegman.
Different Wegman.
People ask us that all the time. And I'm sad to tell them it's not the same Wegman, but.
I never noticed that it was, first of all, I didn't know that there was a Wegman Piano Company back in the day. And I would have assumed, because Wegman is not exactly a common name, that it would be the one and only, but there was at least two different Wegman
piano
families.
factory was actually on Logan Street. Close to where the Wegmans is today, actually.
That's right, just a stone's throw away from where we are.
Yeah, we still have original pocket doors, again, that slide through here. The second floor would have been bedrooms and just where the family lived other than the main floor. So one of the things that I like the most about working here is that we still have the bones of the historic house and we know enough about it that we can just give you a tour of the house itself, but we also get to do exhibits at the same time. So we aren't, we don't have the historic house narrative that we have to stick to. We can do exhibits on anything with the history of Auburn and Cayuga County. So what we do on the first floor and up here on the second floor is we do different types of exhibits. We use both things from our permanent collection and we seek loaned items from members of the community for different things that we do. So this area up here, it was 4 bedrooms when the family lived here. Pretty standard. We still have some of the nice original woodwork and things like that. But the big thing up here is really the exhibits.
And one of the permanent exhibits, which has been here for a while, it's focusing on the history of the Auburn prison, which is also essentially a stone's throw away. Not literally, wouldn't recommend doing that.
Both sides of the wall, Auburn and its prison. It first opened in, I think, 2004, and it was a mega exhibit that filled up every single gallery of the entire place. But it was so popular, and it is such an important part of Auburn's history that we didn't want to get rid of it, so we've just pared it down over the years. We've reconfigured it a little bit, but it's kind of lived in this one gallery for a few years now. What we have is outside here, we have some things that were actually made in the prison because a big part of the early prison was its manufacturing. And the other thing that we have is the prison cell. So it's a reproduction cell that is the size of the current cell at Auburn Prison, or Auburn Correctional Facility is what we should be calling it today.
This is a real-life replica of what a cell at the Auburn Correctional Facility, a mouthful to say, this is what, so if I walk in here, which you know I'm going to, if I walk in here, this is exactly what it would feel like being in the prison. Gotta be honest, does not feel good.
No.
Does this slide open or?
No, that does not.
Not somewhere I ever want to be again.
No.
Especially if I have to wear beige or whatever the prison uniform is. Orange?
Well, there's a few things that Auburn Prison is best known for. There was a couple of big major firsts that came out of the prison. One of them is it was the first place to put prisoners in individual cells, first place to put them in striped uniforms, and the first use of the electric chair. But speaking of the uniforms, it was the very first time that you see them in stripes. And it was meant to humiliate them, which is the reason that they did that.
What about it would be humiliating?
Because it was just not a normal thing for people to wear, and I think it was just supposed to embarrass them and make them feel not normal.
I think anyone who's probably ever seen an old prison movie would have thought that that's what they always wore, that it was always just stripes, but that actually...
It originated here.
Now, if you really want to get the experience of what it's like at this exhibit, you can come to the Cayuga Museum. It's open all throughout the year, but at different times. And again, below at the bottom of the screen is when the museum is open throughout the year.
So throughout these other areas, we do rotating exhibits. The one that we have on display this year is on the history of protest, both nationally and locally. So we just through here, we have different things. We're trying to bring in some interactive elements to our exhibits, which this interactive Bill of Rights. Do you know all of the amendments?
I know the first one, and that's the most important one. But I couldn't tell you offhand what the Sixth Amendment is. It's that. There are a lot of words. I'm pretty sure it means you have a right to a speedy trial. That would be the Cliff Notes version.
You're right.
Because it says speedy and public trial.
Yeah.
Probably goes without saying that an exhibit about protest, they say the thing about history is if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. Protest is nothing new. It's been around as long as man has been. So this is an exhibit about protest in general, not about any specific event.
We're reminding people of one of their inherent rights as an American, is the right to protest. So we're focusing on kind of the history of some of the major ones, kind of some of the early marches, like when there was the Women's Suffrage March, and then we also are bringing in some of the other local ones. Like this image right behind you was from one of the local factories, the E.D. Clapp Manufacturing Company, but then there was also part of a strike at the Columbian Rope Factory, which was in 1913. They called in the National Guard. And the people, they weren't doing anything they were not out of control. They were just simply standing outside, striking against the working conditions. So part of what we're doing with an exhibit like this is we're tying in how national movements like the labor movement, how they trickle down to places like Auburn. So when there was a rise of unions, when people were actually starting to realize that they should have rights as workers, we had these big manufacturing centers in Auburn, and people were realizing that they should be fighting for their rights. So they did things like strike. And it worked. So this is one of the earlier ones in 1913. And then we also have, this was a later strike at the exact same factory, at the Columbian Rope Factory. This one was in 1965. And you can see, again, people peacefully protesting. This is actually fun. We brought this out. This is a part of the fence from in front of Columbian Rope, which you can see it in the image. So we brought that. Also very heavy. Very, very heavy.
This part of the gate?
Yes.
Not even trying to lift it?
Yeah. But it just shows how history is cyclical, and things, there was something happened in 1913, and then 1965, people did the same thing. And if you go throughout, you can see there's more on the wall with different things. Little interactives, you can open it up and read all about what happened, which in fact, actually, October 25th, it's coming right up, the anniversary of that one. But then we have other things like, some of these things were borrowed from, so I said, we use permanent collection and loans from other organizations. This was an abolitionist journal that we borrowed from the Chemung County Historical Society. From 1839, so that's an early one. But we have it right next to a slave's bill of sale from Cayuga County that is part of our permanent collection.
Just out of curiosity, could you explain how you end up borrowing things? Do you reach out to the Historical Society, or do they reach out to you, or is it a combination?
Yeah, so when we're working on an exhibit, normally, 6 months to a year prior to creating the exhibit, we make a list of the objects that we already have and the things that we're looking for to create the exhibit. So when we have, subject matter like this that we don't have enough really to show, then we just reach out to other local organizations to see what they have. We always start with all the ones that are within, the county, but then sometimes we go outside of it if we need to. So, this one's, Chemung County, it's a little bit further away, but again, the subject matter, it translates to everything throughout upstate New York in the region. So.
And really, Chemung County is about an hour and a half away, so it's not that far.
It's not that far. And especially when you're talking about something like abolition, people were going all throughout, definitely the state and, the whole Northeast to work on things like that.
Well, you told us earlier downstairs, Dr. Willard would have to travel by horse for many, many days just to get to an appointment. So
yeah.
What are we complaining about?
And then so speaking of labor, we also have over here a scrapbook that was put together by, we don't know who it was, but a local citizen that's completely filled with things that are related to labor in Auburn and Cayuga County. So it's all about different strikes that have happened. Basically, in any article that has to do with labor for decades, they put this together.
So basically scrapbooking before scrapbooking was a thing. This is a chair that was created by prisoners long time ago, and it's as comfortable as you can imagine a couch designed by people who are going to be behind bars for the rest of their lives can possibly be. Well, Kirsten, I think that pretty much wraps up our tour. Thank you very much. That was very informative and interesting. And again, the museum is open all year round, the Cayuga Museum of History and Art. That's the thing I'm taking away from this tour. It's open all year round, but it varies depending on where we are on the calendar. So, bottom of the screen is where you can find out when it's open. Look at that, very nice graphic that has eaten up all of our budget. And Kirsten, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm Joe Salzone, and we'll see you next time for a walking tour in downtown Auburn. Just one more thing to show you before we go. This is the Case Research Lab. On the surface, it's just a building. In reality, this is where the process of sound on film was invented. So any movie that you've watched in the last 75 years, your ability to hear that was invented in this room thanks to Theodore Case. And if you want to get a peek inside, you're going to have to come to the museum when the museum is open at the times below, because remember, as we learned earlier with Kirsten, it varies throughout the year. It's open all year round, but the hours and days vary. So, bottom of the screen, right here, is where you can check out the Cayuga Museum and the Case Research Lab. But wait, there's more. This is the Carriage House Theater. It's part of the Cayuga Museum. If you've never been inside, you're missing out on quite a bit. And if you want to see what's inside of that, or the Case Research Lab, or the Cayuga Museum, look below and find out the hours. Thanks for joining us on a walking tour. I'm Joe Salzone. We'll catch you next time.